And gracias. Thank you for joining us today. I am Reverend Hector Josue Hernandez Marcial, and I serve as the Director of Community Engagement for the National Benevolent Association of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ of the United States and Canada. Today, webinars concludes our 2021 series of webinars and education training offered by the Prison and Jail Ministries of the National Benevolent Association. And today is the fourth and last webinar of this year. As we get started, I would like you to inform that this webinar will be recorded and will be available for future viewing at the MBA website at mbacares.org. If you have any questions through the webinar, we welcome you to use the Q&A feature by clicking on the icon at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions. And please include your email address in case we are unable to get to your question. We could follow up directly with you via email after the webinar concludes. In today's webinar, Second Chance Employment, Making an Impact by Hiring Formerly Incarcerated People. Together we will explore the importance of considering the employment of people who are returning from our prison and jails and those who are in recovery. Today in this space, as always, is Reverend Dean Bucalos, who is MBA's Prison and Jail Ministries Mission Specialist and the moderator of this conversation. And with us also today are two exceptional community leaders who are very familiar with this important issue, and it's my delight to introduce themselves, sharing with you a brief glimpse on their bio. Our first guest today is Savvy Shabazz. This is not the first time that he is willing to be in a space with us. So we are very happy that he said yes one more time. And he is the acting president of All of Us or None, Louisville at He is the acting president of All of Us or None Louisville. He is a 2018 NME Genius Fellow and a member of the 2019 Community Justice Action Fund Speaker Bureau and the Mass Story Lab Speakers Bureau. After Mr. Shabazz was sentenced to a total of 28 years in prison for drug offenses, he dedicated himself to standing on Life Coach, Each One, Teach One Re-Entry Fellowship, which brings awareness and prevention to the 3 P's: prison, probation, and parole. He states, "My life has transformed and come into full bloom. My life today is in full stride due to my large dose of humanity. Seeds of self-destruction and hatred that were planted long before developing into seed of strength and determination along the journey. Out of this struggle, I have been born, and through this struggle, I am becoming complete." Wow. Thank you once again, Savvy, for being here with us. With us also today is Rob Perez. Um, and with 30 years of restaurant experience, Rob has seen firsthand how to build restaurant brand and how to prevalent addiction in this industry he loved. Along his wife, Diane, he founded DV8 Kitchen as a social enterprise focused focused on giving second chance employment opportunities to people in recovery from drug or alcohol addiction through vocational on the job training. DV8 Kitchen focuses on providing top quality food service and atmosphere for every guest. And by providing a better than expected dining experience, the hope is to build a new standard for the second chance employee to live by and to change the way the guests perceive people in addiction recovery. To both, to Savvy and to Rob, bienvenidos, welcome. It is more than a privilege having both of you here today with us. And at this point, I would like to turn the presentation to our participants, and this conversation will be led by Reverend Dean Bucalos.
Thank you, Hector. Today we approach an important topic, employment, particularly focusing on employing people who have made mistakes in their past and are simply seeking a better life. It's an interesting topic today as we see help wanted signs in nearly every storefront. Why are those who've been incarcerated and those in recovery having such a difficult time finding meaningful work? What are the obstacles, barriers, stereotypes keeping the doors shut? And what are the realistic pathways to something more than a minimum wage job, but instead a career? Today, we're blessed to have two people who wrestle with these questions and have graciously agreed to share their wisdom with us. So I too welcome Rob and Savvy. We've sent to them some questions for them to consider for us during this webinar today. I'm going to begin with Savvy and ask you to share your experience with second chance employment.
Greetings, everyone. Thanks for the great introduction, Hector. And thanks again for having me into the space. I can't say enough about the work that we all do. And just having that opportunity to be able to share with everyone what that experience was like. So as Hector mentioned before, I was sentenced to a total of 28 years for nonviolent drug offenses in Kentucky. So I served 5.5 years, came home. I had some previous skills with employment. As far as employment, I had a resume, I had previous jobs. But once you get that mark on your background, it becomes extremely difficult to find work anywhere. My experience, I say all the time, it was a horrific experience. To be able to go to interviews, prepare for interviews, and you continue to hear things that from your past that may have happened 10, 15 years ago. Just recently, matter of fact, yesterday, I work with individuals that are coming home from incarceration. We also support individuals that are currently incarcerated as well. And an individual lost his job for an offense that he committed in 2004. It is 2021, and things are still happening the same way. My experience, come home, apply for a job, apply for a job, apply for a job. You hear no so many times, it becomes customary to hear that no. So it's a horrific experience. You know, you have bills, Everybody has a landlord. We have responsibilities, right? We're human too. We may have hit some hurdles, and we're trying to get over those hurdles as well. I've been denied employment to cut grass for $7.25 an hour. The answer was no, because of my background. We find second chance employers. They're hard, but then we have to go through, and not everybody does. We have to go through specific trainings just to get their staff and to get them understand who they are hiring, just to make sure that we're also being treated well while we're at work too. Because nobody wants to be in the break room and everybody's whispering about the convicted felon over here in the corner, right? So those are things that we deal with as well. Just the responsibilities of just being able to get up and get to and from work, and understand that when we're released, we're not released with apartments and cars and vehicles, to get to and from. It's a horrific experience. You're going to have to learn how, some of us had to learn to ride the TARC. I'm originally from Paducah, Kentucky. Moving to Louisville, Kentucky, I had to learn how the routes of the TARC. Once I was released, I went 5.5 years without a car. TARC was my way in a city that was foreign to me, but I had to learn that way, and all too much familiar for employment opportunities that paid way less than $10 per hour. So we're looking for those opportunities as well. As formerly incarcerated people and directly impacted people, we're looking for those opportunities as well, so we can sustain a livable wage as well.
Thank you, Savvy.
You're welcome.
I'm going to ask Rob to share with us the nature and origins of his restaurant.
So thanks, Dean. Thanks, Hector. It's a pleasure to be with you. So this idea wasn't mine. It was my wife's. And frankly, my experience as a business guy was rooted in misconception. And I followed the T, every single thing that I learned as proper human relations, and I excluded people that had gaps or had felonies. And so I was programmed not to look at this opportunity that my wife presented, which was to take what we've done in our life, restaurants, and to establish a helping opportunity to express our faith through an experience that we had. Like for me, it's recovery. I went through rehab at 25. My wife helped me through it. And so I know something about recovery, and I know something about restaurants. So she proposed that we open up a restaurant to help people in early stages of recovery from substance use disorder. Well, again, I fought all the way. Didn't think it could happen for many different aspects. She attacked me on it, and I finally acquiesced. Another story. But when we did it, we realized that we had no way to understand how we could predict success from folks until we started understanding the basic needs to be a productive member of free enterprise. And that was, you needed to have stable housing. You needed to be able to be working on a program that tried to structure your life after, coming through recovery. Third, was there a way to even work with the community members that already were helping people in recovery, like testing for drugs and alcohol? We found that these three key components, if we partnered up with other community partners, that we could actually have a whole team of people in recovery that assists us in encouraging people to stay in recovery. And I think this is a good time to say that that I cannot uncouple recovery from incarceration nor generational poverty. So the folks that we have at DV8 are not just in recovery, they have a background in incarceration and generational poverty. And so I think it's a much broader mission that we got into. But The point of it is that we were able to work with folks that are in recovery. And now we have 100% of our folks in 2 restaurants and a bakery that are all from recovery. We expect 20% better from them, and they deliver. Yelp does a national survey each year where they analyze every recommendation or review that's done on every restaurant site. And DV8 was named the 40th best restaurant in America, with people that generally are shunned from other employers. After we kind of got this system going and it worked well, we realized that we don't really have a supply problem. We have a demand problem. And we started working with other employers to try to convince them that second chance employees are worthy and wonderful. And we should maybe break some of the rules and employ them, because they're not only so valuable, but it would do something for our society and probably prevent recidivism. And that's what we're finding. So that's our trek.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you both, Savvy and Rob, for doing what you do and working with this population and helping them make a better life for themselves. Savvy, I'm going to come back to you and ask, what have been the noticeable barriers and obstacles to the hiring of people who've been recently incarcerated?
I think you're on mute, Savvy.
One of the major barriers that we're faced with when coming home from incarceration is as simple as a identification. Upon release, we meet with a parole or probation officer. We're required to find and seek employment. That's the first 2 things that they're asked. 2 forms of ID. Just recently, I believe that a few organizations in Kentucky passed a bill where the Department of Corrections will actually be assisting with providing that service. But this was just passed this year, right? People have been coming home for decades needing 2 forms of identification, right? So we're behind with that. Like, this just happened. Another thing coming home is transportation. So you're asking me to come to work every day, but again, unfortunately, we're not released with transportation. So we have organizations like my own who provide TARC passes and the fare to assist as well. So that's an issue, transportation. We do have some organizations that assist with that, but there's few, right? Not everybody's providing that service. Basic soft skills. People are coming home. We need resumes. More and more, we're seeing people that are coming home and they're needing resumes. These are things that should start before you're even released. So I look to the Department of Corrections to be responsible for that. Another issue that we're faced with is housing. No one wants to go back into the same environment that put them in a situation to be incarcerated. And a lot of times we're faced with those type of transitional housing. It sounds good, but it was a very horrific experience for me as well, coming home to a transitional house. It sounded a lot better than a halfway house, but that wasn't the truth. It was a real horror movie. I won't go into the details about that, but it was really an horrific experience in that transitional house. So those are my 3 biggest things. And being able to provide, everybody wants to provide for themselves and their families, right? And at this point, upon release, transportation, housing, employment, those are the biggest barriers that we're faced with. And that's my experience in regards to that. That's a lot of what I'm seeing with individuals that I'm not only experienced with my own experience, but those are the same issues that individuals are dealing with that I work with on a daily basis too. Dean, you're on mute.
Will, can you unmute? Can you
We're
hear me
good.
now? So Rob, what I want to ask is, what's been your experience in hiring second chance employees, and how and why did you begin that practice? You talked a little bit about that already, but what's been your experience? What have been some of the challenges in working with that population?
Well, I think in general, the trick of this trade, in my opinion, is not being a transactional employer, but being a relational employer. Many times folks coming out of incarceration, addiction, generational poverty, there are some soft skills that need to be developed. And as a transitional boss, a transactional boss, you'll end up just saying, hey, 3 strikes and you're out. You're late 3 times, then you just fire the person, no questions asked, because that's something that is a kind of non-negotiable. That's what you just have to do. Well, sometimes what we find is that you kind of have to ask a bunch of questions. And a better way to go about it is to say, why? Why are you late? Continue to ask why until you get through the excuses and you find the root cause of why someone was late. Staying up too late, eating and drinking something with caffeine late, not having a real alarm clock, small things like that. But within the conversation that you have with an employee, you end up understanding that maybe they aren't really understanding what it takes to be on time. They had a structured environment before, they didn't have to worry about it. And once you take a little bit of time and give a little bit of yourself, not only do they learn to be on time, but they also appreciate what you've done and taking time with them. And this cyclical nature can continue, and it ends up being a relationship that's stronger than just a regular boss and employee kind of a relationship. And it's been highly effective for us. And I would suggest that anybody that's interested in becoming a second chance employer, try this.
Thank you. So Savvy, you've been really in both places, looking for employment and now helping people find employment and being in contact with second chance employers and businesses that may be willing to hire. So what advice would you give those in the business world regarding the hiring of returning citizens? I mean, what cautions should they be aware of? Special preparation? What do they need to be sensitive to regarding issues and behaviors that are common among justice involved people?
I think one of the biggest things, we've discussed this several times. I know you've heard me, we've been in spaces several times. One of the biggest things is standing on their mission and vision, right? Every company, every organization has a mission and vision. And if you read into that mission and vision, treating people the way they should be treated is always included, right? And that doesn't happen a lot of times. So we just want to speak it on behalf of the entire formerly incarcerated community. We want to be treated just like everyone else. We want to be compensated just like everyone else. I think the biggest thing that I pull out of the question you asked is the language. And I can use triggers because these are things that trigger. We hear convicted felon, we hear felon, we hear convicts, we hear inmates. That's harmful language. And we've worked for years, all of us have done national life coach, each one teacher and reentry fellowship across the nation with organizations to change the language that can trigger and cause harm to individuals that are coming home from incarceration. So we work on that language, and we like to humanize people and remove the harmful language that I just spoke and replace it with humanizing language. Formerly incarcerated people, directly impacted people, system impacted people, people with lived experience. This is humanizing people. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do is to treat people the way that we want to be treated, and to also compensate people, but to also understand and change the language, the harmful language that we've been conditioned to use, and start pushing and utilizing the humanizing language that I just spoke about.
Thank you. Rob, back to you. You and DV8 have been very successful in this area of second chance employment, and I know that you've gotten a well-deserved reputation for the success that you've had. So what advice would you give to others in the business world regarding the hiring of returning citizens? Similar question that I asked to Savvy. What cautions, special preparation, sensitivity to certain issues and behaviors of those that you've encountered who are either returning from incarceration or who are in the process of recovery?
Yeah, I'd highly encourage other employers to contemplate kind of their company ethos and to relook at some of the HR practices that they have by just reviewing reviewing applications or resumes. You can see gaps in the employment. You can see that potentially people don't live where you think that most of your employees live, or the name that's on top of it. And what I would say is if you could acknowledge that and decide to interview that person and let them stand up and answer for themselves and be able to tell you in an interview why they deserve the job, I'm telling you, you're going to have a lot more success in your business, because you're going to be an employer for all, not just the exclusive. And I am suggesting that when you just decide that you want to do it, and maybe take kind of your corporate responsibility from things like recycling to helping people, that free enterprise can not only be a good system, it might even just save the world. And I think it's a mindset more than tactical.
Thank you. So this next question is really for both of you. So why do you think it's important for all of us to welcome those returning to our communities, especially in the job market? And what's the best way to do that? So I'll ask Savvy to answer that first and then come back to Rob.
I think one of the best ways that we can do that is to understand how the world works. People make mistakes. People run into hurdles. People have to get over hurdles. And we have to understand that everybody should be given a second chance. And we got to also understand that a lot of individuals that are going through incarceration and have been through incarceration were never granted a first chance in the first place, because we have a lot of toolboxes with a lot of missing tools in them as well. So we got to understand that a lot of people were never given the first chance to come back. I think one of the biggest things that we utilize at Life Coach Each One Teach One Reentry Fellowship, we look at individuals as assets, and we use a tool called asset framing. What does that look like? We find the leadership in individuals. We look at individuals that are coming home to our families and communities as assets to their families and communities as well. And we try to develop, we try to find the leadership in the individual, but then we try to develop the leadership individual as well, so that person can thrive in their family and thrive in their community. We want to help develop those tools and put tools back in that toolbox that were never in the toolbox. So I think those are the most two important things, is to find the leadership in the individual, develop the leadership, and use that individual and let them know that they are assets to the communities and the families they are returning to.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Shabazz. I mean, for us, I think that it's really important that we realize that we don't win as a nation, as a business, without everybody included. And when there's any group that's excluded at all, then we're not doing our job. And I think that what we found, just even by virtue of watching our ratings on simple things like Yelp, we perform incredibly well. that must mean that we have some pretty talented people to make food, bake bread, deliver service, provide in an environment that's good. I mean, 40th in the nation, that's pretty solid. And the talent that is coming out of generational poverty, incarceration, and addiction is huge. And it's an untapped, unmeasurable advantage for our system, for our business, and for our faith. And I think that, you know, if it's untapped, then it's just a travesty for both sides, the business and the future potential employee.
Thanks. So many of the people who'll be watching this webinar and who may be looking at it later are faith-based folks, people in churches, pastors, congregation members. What can churches do? What are some things that communities of faith can do, synagogues, mosques, congregations, to assist in this process of welcoming people back into the community, but also helping them find not only jobs, but also careers? Savvy?
I think one of the biggest things I don't think we can put a number on is support. Support. And that can come in a lot of different forms. Congregations are built of many people, business owners, people that can put the tools back in the toolbox that's needed. I think we got to build those relationships. I think we have to take those business owners that are members of those congregations, and we have to approach and we have to let them know, we need you to be a second chance employer. And we support this, right? We understand some of the hurdles that individuals are faced with coming home. You're a part of the congregation here, and we want you to be able to support and offer second chance employment and training as well. Because if that person has a business, then they'll definitely have a training that they can offer for this individual as well. So I think the biggest thing is to build those relationships through the church and through the communities to reach out to the individuals that are coming home from incarceration and build support and offer the support that's needed.
Thank you, Savvy.
I think
Rob,
a few
Rob,
days ago, me and you talked, and I mentioned that we hear a lot about church being involved, but we don't see a lot of the work across the board. So we definitely want to continue to support, and definitely I wanted to bring that in space because that was a good conversation we had a few days ago.
Rob, your thoughts?
As lovingly as I can put this, I thought that when we added the quest of helping other employers figure out how to become second chance employers, that the most fertile ground would be the Christian community. And I found something opposite than that. And I'm not exactly sure. I'm not a sociologist, but my hunch is that we're kind of, as a group, and I hate to group us, I hate to generalize, but maybe we're adverse to risk. Maybe we're adverse to insecurity. Maybe we are rule followers. I'm not sure. But I do know this. When I had to examine myself, when I realized this about the modern Christian movement in America, in my humble opinion, I realized that I was just like that. And I think that I had to really apply the whole, am I transactional as a Christian or am I relational as a Christian? And I had to evaluate that. And I found that everything that I thought was my works were transactional. It made me really contemplate myself as a man of faith. And I've tried to be more intentional about having a relationship and giving of myself and giving of time. And it's a natural way to go about it by offering employment. And it's pretty effective. And it's a win-win. So I would just say, contemplate this in your own faith and see where it could find a place and rest in your heart. And that's what I'd suggest.
Thank you. Which is a good segue, because I want to draw our viewers into an understanding of why the National Benevolent Association is hosting a webinar like this. When you have why this is important for faith-based people, why this is something that we should be concerned about. There's a lot of attention given to the economy and money in Jesus' teachings. He knew the importance of people's needs to be employed in purposeful, honest, and equitable work. And to be fully human, one needs to contribute to family and community in very positive ways. Creating healthy jobs that treat people fairly is one of the signs of the kingdom of heaven here on earth. The Christian community can set an example for the rest of society by demonstrating that its members welcome those needing a second chance in their places of employment. Living wages, good working conditions, reasonable expectations are all really justice issues. They drove the ministry of the social gospel in the early 20th century, led by Reverend Walter Rauschenbach, a Baptist minister who advocated for better working conditions for those living in American urban cities. And from this, child labor laws, reasonable working hours, safe working conditions, and even minimum wages became an economic reality in the United States. Rauschenbach professed that our religious beliefs must be put into action, and God is acting and Christ is here now. That it was up to people to follow, who are followers of Christ, to act on the message of Christ and to help create the kingdom of God here on earth. And today we're faced with different issues, but certainly the unbiased hiring of those seeking a second chance is one of these pressing issues in a country where mass incarceration exists and in which 95% of the people who are incarcerated will ultimately be returning to our communities. When we had our rehearsal, Rob mentioned being inspired by Matthew 9, verses 10 through 13 as a guiding scripture for his ministry and work. And it's well for all of us to listen to this important teaching. And here's what it says. And as Jesus sat at table at dinner in the house, after inviting Matthew, the tax collector, to follow him, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when Jesus heard this, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick, go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." So we can learn from this and practice this ministry of mercy and kindness as we open doors to those who've made mistakes and are simply seeking a better life. I'm grateful for the examples of people like Savvy and Rob who have committed their lives to doing just that. Whether they're followers of Jesus or not, they're doing the work of the gospel. So I want to turn it over now to Hector, to anyone who might have a question for either Rob or Savvy.
Thank you to Savvy and to Rob. And yeah, we got one question from well, we have a few questions, but let's begin with one question that Cheryl Gallegos shared with us, and I'm reading directly. I see a lot of employers saying that saying they are fellow friendly, but then always excluding those violent crimes and sex crimes. Any recommendations of having them change their mind? And please expand. So hopefully you get the essence of the question, and the question is open to any of you.
Well, for us, we have a position where we think that, if you believe in free enterprise, you got to believe in all of it. So I don't want to tell anybody to do anything that they feel uncomfortable with, but I will tell you that we have a policy of not worrying about what the issue is. And our business rationale behind that is that if someone has acknowledged their life is unmanageable because of drugs or alcohol, and they're taking the effort to be part of a program, to being tested, to working with a behavior modification team to try to help them, and we can validate that, then we believe that whatever the charge, we're going to be safe if they're working it, at least relatively safe, and it's enough for us. So I'm not sure how to dictate where someone wants to get into the game of second chance. I only suggest that they do it. It could be with just a simple gap of employment. It could be with just a misdemeanor. It could be with just no, felony. I don't know. I don't know, but I do suggest everybody tries to help someone that not only wants a job, but is qualified for a job and needs a job, as opposed to just the general person that you've always hired before. Because it's time for us to change our behavior so that we include everybody in the American dream, not just the people that already have.
Savvy, is there anything that you would like to add to that question?
Yes, I would. I think Rob hit on all the points needed. I would have to definitely say, understanding the English language, we understand that if you have to say "but" after your statement, that may not be a true statement, right? If you say "I don't mean to be disrespectful," then you're actually being disrespectful, right? So if you say that you're felony friendly, but you have exclusions for what that looks like, you're not actually felony friendly. We need to move forward. We need to understand how the system of oppression of incarceration works. And we need to understand that people are coming home from incarceration. People have been through incarceration, and everybody needs a second chance to live.
Thank you. And amen to that. There is another question that is very interesting and is open to both of you. Are there any taxes or any tax benefits to hiring those who are formerly incarcerated or justice involved?
We try to help folks in trying to mitigate risk, if that's important, to try to change the decision makers' minds, because frequently it's a dollar and cents question. So there is a federal program that allows a $5,000 bond for anybody with background that any business can apply for. They just couldn't have applied for it for this person prior. Second, most states do provide tax credits. For example, in the state of Kentucky, where we are, there is a 500-hour opportunity for someone that goes through the Kentucky Career Center. There is also some tax, you'd have to talk to your CPA, but there are some tax credits that are offered when you do your taxes as well. So I think that if it's out there, it's available. If that mitigates a risk for people or convinces people in a decision-making process to change their mind because that's their primary issue, they don't want to lose money if they have to have turnover and have to retrain people, then great, use it.
I have to totally agree. From my experience, from being in spaces, the big companies and big organizations that are getting a lot of money to hire individuals just like myself. One of my main experiences, I worked a job in my hometown of Paducah, Kentucky, having some issues with transportation. And my supervisor told me that they could not lay me off because they were invested in me. And when I asked him what that meant, he said that that company gets a large number of funding, government funding, to hire people like me. And he specifically said, I'm not talking about your skin color either. He was talking about my background. And he said, why do you think so many of your buddies work out here? And I work with a lot of people that have been formerly incarcerated. They were receiving government funding to hire people like me. It still exists to this day.
Wow. We just received a question that we have other questions, but I want to move this one first. From Terry Robinson. Terry, thank you. And I'm reading, as a pastor, also a convicted felon in a rural area in the Midwest, what advice could you give on approaching farmers and family-owned businesses with second chance?
Well, I actually grew up in California. My father was a first generation American and the son of a migrant farm worker. And my mother was a small, independent farmer. And I grew up, in that environment. Hey, look, I think that if someone could be addressed as a farmer to just say what is it's the right thing. You can, get tax credits if you need it. You can mitigate your risk that way. You could also figure out how to expand your faith. You could figure out how to help humanity. There's so many triggers that have to be used with convincing someone to do it. But all I know is that if you let the farmer know that there is great standards, great effort, and great relationships built by people that are in recovery, that have a past of incarceration, it doesn't mean that you're not going to show up for work, not work hard, and not get along with everybody. And don't assume that. And have a second chance. Give them a chance.
I think one of the biggest things that Rob said was one of the barriers we have to remove is assumption, right? If we can get past a person's background and assuming what we've seen on TV and what we've heard from other people, and all of the stereotypes that we get, and just give a person a chance, we can provide a service for an individual, and hopefully we can start a career for an individual as well. But we have to remove the barriers, the stereotypes and things that we have. And with that particular field of farming, you can launch someone's career and change somebody's family and generational family for a long time.
The other thing that comes to my mind is the role of the pastor in that community. The word and the intervention of the pastor and the congregation could have a lot of weight into, it's like the church, the pastor are backing up this person. So it's not, the person doesn't come out of the blue. So it could allow people to be maybe more willing by that relationship with the pastor and that congregation. Because like Rob was saying, this is not transactional. This is more community. Is you make the connection in that way. Taking in consideration our time, there are other questions that I would like to see if we have enough time. Do job fairs work? Is there a better way to connect those willing to hire with those needing employment who are seeking second chance? That's one of the questions.
I have had and I'm speaking from a personal experience, I haven't had me personally, I didn't have a very good experience with job fair. You go in, you talk to people, you sign a sign-in sheet, you pick up information in regards to a job, and you never hear anything back. You follow up within the next week, positions are full, you hope for an interview, it may happen, it may not happen. So I never was very successful with job fairs. What I would suggest is a reentry fair. If I'm a company and an organization and I'm looking for individuals that are formerly incarcerated, I can have a job fair. I can host and facilitate a job fair specifically for that demographic. Meaning your number one qualification to even come in this job fair is to be formerly incarcerated. That's how you eliminate that barrier, right? The only people that's going to come inside this job fair are people that have backgrounds. So if we can start opening up spaces and creating spaces and make job fairs look that way, I think we can find a lot of people are in need of employment that have been formerly incarcerated.
I agree. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The last question that I have, unless any of the other viewers would like to send their questions. The last question that I have is, what is the best way to help someone from a minimum wage position to a career?
Well, what we believe works on all levels is three different approach, three focuses, all based in this relational employment model. And that is to monitor standards, monitor efforts, and monitor relationships with themselves, coworkers, bosses, customers, and in a 12-step program, God's in it too. So we do have discussions about that at work. And when you work on these three things, it's no different than working on any employment issue. And when you really contemplate all these and have discussions with folks, it's pretty powerful. And it really not only teaches people, but it builds the relationship. It also makes your bottom line better. And having all this all happen at once has led Diane and I, my wife, to realize that it is so rewarding when you take service out of the church environment, when you take giving out of the church environment, when you take all that and put it into your vocation. There is something that is just so much sweeter about working the hours that we do, or the attitude that you have about working. It's really changed my whole life. Now, I'm not going to fib that this is not the biggest moneymaker that I've been a part of, and I'm pretty much a glorified busboy. But I've never been more career motivated. I've never been more satisfied when I lay my head on the pillow. It's fantastic. You start off to help people, and you end up helping yourself immeasurably.
I think one of the best things that we can do, and I know this is another one of the tools that we utilize. You got to find out what that individual likes to do. You got to find out what their passion is. We all have one. You got to find out what their drive is. What do they like to do? And one of the first things that we do with Life Coach Teacher and Renju Fellowship is we ask, what did you want to be? And we can go back as far as like 11, 12 years old. Everybody wanted to be somebody at some point. And once that conversation is developed, you may find a carpenter. You may find an electrician. You just need somebody to just pull that out of that individual. So I think that's the first thing, is finding out what that person's passion is and what they like to do. Nobody wants to wake up and go to work and do something that they don't like to do. So we got to find out what that person's good at, what they like to do, what they get up in the morning for, and we got to find that type of a career that we can line up for that individual. Everybody's going to be different. One of the things with me, and I use myself as an example. I always love to be around like hand tools and watch stuff being built and this and that, you know. And I found myself at an early age in carpentry school. Now that's a trade that I don't utilize to this day, but I can still go back in and do that if I had to, because I love doing it. So we got to find out what the individuals are good at. This comes from resume building, but it also comes from SMART goals. What do you like to do? What are you passionate about? And then we go after that, because if that person is always talking about electronics and electricians and